The wife was none too pleased and introduced him to a pot of boiling oil. But worry not. I fixed him up, and depending on the lighting, he looks good as new.
Why, she sounds positively demented. I love it. Let's tell her everything.
Do you enjoy challenges? Do you enjoy lore? What if I told you I put those babies together? In this series, I'm going to be deep diving into the lore of the Lolth-sworn. We'll be playing as Vyper, a Lolth-sworn cleric. We're going to be required to make choices that are related to the lore of the Lolth-sworn cleric. Each choice is going to be character specific, so we can hit up all that juicy lore. So if you love Baldur's Gate 3, and you also want to enter the addictive world of Dungeons & Dragons, come and join us. Meet Vyper. She's a Lolth-sworn cleric. She's not from a noble house like Minthara. The majority of Lolth's clerics are those who became acolytes to the faith as a way to gain power in their society, because those who are not of noble blood must earn their freedoms within Lothite cities. Early on in this run, I wasn't sure how deep I wanted to go as far as lore diving. So the first few days are going to fly right by gameplay-wise, but the rest, we'll be writing out the episodes like they're a TV show, which means there are going to be some content that's not directly related to Drow, but don't worry, we're still going to be playing in character. Before we begin, let's do a brief overview of Drow and what exactly a Lolth-sworn is. Now, I might be a little biased in this case, because I deeply love Drow, especially the unique take on Drow in Baldur's Gate 3. As a disclaimer, the Drow are not a soft topic. In this series, while diving into the lore, we're going to be addressing topics that include bigotry for race, religion, and gender. I'll do my best to appease those YouTube overlords, which means replacing certain words or terms that are deemed unsuitable, but this is in no way meant to undermine the intensity of those topics. The Drow, they're commonly known as Dark Elves and Under Elves. They're an elven race in Baldur's Gate 3 and in Dungeons & Dragons. Historically, their creation mirrors some of the most common myths related to Cain and Abel, that, the god of all elves, Corleon, punished the Drow, cursing them with dark skin. We can get into an entire rant here about misinformation and high-demand religions, but that's a detour for later. It's commonly believed that all Drow are evil. Spoiler alert, they're not. According to the Player Handbook, the 5th edition, to quote, "Unlike creatures such as orcs, Drow have no innate inclination towards evil, with their morality having been colored by their society. Good Drow make up about 15% of the entire race, although most of them weren't actually of good alignment, but merely a chaotic neutral or a lawful neutral." And to also quote, "Truly exceptional good Drow were capable of freeing themselves from Lothite society." Enter the major Drow races of Baldur's Gate 3. Although there are many sub-races of Drow in Dungeons & Dragons, Baldur's Gate 3 only has 2, Lolth-sworn and Celadrine. In this series, we're going to be primarily focusing on Lolth-sworn Drow, as we'll be playing a Lolth-sworn cleric. Unlike the typical Lolth-sworn Drow that might be of a different class, they would be a lawful or chaotic evil. Lolth-sworn clerics, they often fall into that edge of the 15%. Many clerics are lawful neutrals. However, their laws are based on their evil goddess Lolth, which means that their choices, though neutral to them, might seem evil to the outside eye. Before we can get into the meat and potatoes, let's explain being Lolth-sworn. In the simplest of terms, Lolth-sworn Drow are Drow who are sworn to worship the goddess Lolth. Lolth is known as the Spider Queen. She's usually seen as a beautiful hybrid who's half Drow and half giant spider. Think Driders like Karnus, but, for peeps who love the V. She's known to be deceitful, ambitious, and ruthless. Her culture is that of a matriarchy, meaning women rule. Men are second-class citizens in Drow society. And that's to a point where there are some men who exist solely for the pleasure of matriarchs, if you know what I mean. Despite what you might think, Drow are not inherently a women-loving women group. However, there are some supplemental materials that heavily imply that Drow are either naturally born or societally required to be bi. In Lolth culture, men typically have to seduce their way to the top, manipulating women in powerful houses to achieve their power and control. Which means if you're playing as a Drow woman who is also attracted to men, it would be extremely lore accurate for that character to fall in love with Astarion. He'd fit into the mold of what Menzo Brandon men would be like, having to serve spicy moments to women as a manipulation for protection. However, let's say you were a Drow who wants to play a female-loving female romance. You'd likely romance Minthara if you were a more submissive woman because she comes from a powerful noble house, and that would help you gain in society. Whereas if you were a more dominant woman, say you came from a noble background, you're more likely to romance Shadowheart. And this isn't just because of the connection between Shar and the Drow, but also because of how easily manipulated Shadowheart is due to her religious affiliation in the beginning of the game. Now keep in mind, all of these romances I'm mentioning would be considered taboo. To censor spicy times, those are heavily welcomed in Drow society, so long as the expression of love is not present and you don't do anything in a position where one's back is showing. Minthara loving somebody in the game was a huge risk. And if you were with Shadowheart, it would most likely be a loveless relationship where she was your underling or your pet. Whereas in cases where having a lover might draw you closer to Lolth because of the status they hold, you would be more willing to risk the taboo for a chance to ascend higher with your god without the curse of being a Drider. The last thing to remember before we start is that Loftsworn Drow are people who are at war with themselves. Noble houses, they fight for power so often and so ruthlessly you would think this was a George R.R. Martin book. For this challenge, each choice I make in this campaign, I'm going to be putting lore first. This means that when there is a Loftsworn Cleric specific choice, that is my top priority. However, in situations where there is not one, I'm going to default to either Loftsworn, Cleric, or Drow choices. In situations where none of those are an option, I'm going to attempt to make choices that come from a balance of both wanting to stay true to the lore of Lolth, but also wanting to give you the most quests possible so that you can get all of the juicy content. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How could someone who's from the Underdark be captured by mind flayers? Well, that's an easy answer. There are a lot of mind flayers in the Underdark. If you've never played Dungeons & Dragons before, you might be led to think that mind flayers come from outer space, as a lot of times in this game we call them alien. Or maybe they're from the astral plane. However, according to the Monster Manual 4th edition, we learned that mind flayers' homeland is a place called the Far Realm. Despite how its name might sound, it's not a part of the astral plane. In fact, it's from a realm even further away from the main planes. However, enter in Monster Manual 5th edition. This is where we discover that mind flayers have moved into the Underdark in an attempt to escape the Gith, who have now consumed the skies in their hunt for the Illithid. This is why in the game you'll see that Dwagar can sense your tadpoles. Well, they don't have one themselves. Mind Flayer were known to create unique creatures, think the intellect devourers, but with each race they made totally different creatures. And of all the races in the Underdark, the Dwagar and the Deep Gnomes faced the worst of it. So, canonically speaking, playing a Drow in this opening, we should not only be aware of Mind Flayers, but also intellect devourers. However, despite this, both Drow and Deep Gnomes are not, and only Dwagar get a unique scene with the Intellect Devourer.
Yes, you've come to save us from this place. From this place you'll free us.
The exposed brain quivers in expectation.
Please. Before they return. They return.
Who am I talking to? A man or a brain?
You realize you're talking to an intellect devourer, a minion of the mind flayers who abducted you.
The enemy. So many enemies.
I think you're past the point of saving. Tell me what to do.
Remove us from this body. From this case. Free us. Please.
Roll for dexterity. Pry the brain free.
The brain lifts from the skull, but you notice an opportunity. You could cripple the strange creature, making it more subservient, should it prove a threat.
Let's spare us any injury.
We are free. Our freedom is ours, friend.
The creature pauses, listening. Something behind your eyes seizes in recognition.
We must go to the helm. At the helm, we are needed.
All right, brain pup. Let's go.
To the helm we go. We are going to the helm.
Abomination. This is your end.
Your head throbs and your skin tingles. Visions rush past. A dragon's wing, a silver sword, and a flash of your face seen through the strange woman's eyes.
My head. What is this? Skvar. You are no thrall. Vlaakith blesses me this day. Together, we might survive.
What made you think I was a thrall?
We carry mind flayer parasites. Unless we escape, unless we are cleansed, our bodies and minds will be tainted and twisted. Within days, we will be Geich, mind flayers.
We're turning into mind flares? There has to be something we could do.
We can do nothing until we escape. That must be our priority. First, we exterminate the imps. Then we find the helm and take control of the ship. As for that thing, it will remain tame as long as it believes we are thralls. It may be of use in the fight to come. Attacker! We are nearing the helm. Once inside...
Thrall, connect the nerves of the transponder. We must escape. Now.
Do it. We will deal with the Geich after we escape.
Connect the nerves. Nerves. We will connect them.
Time.
blasted door, What? Stop! Not another step or I'll... Wait! You're that drow I saw on the ship. You survived then?
Suddenly you see what she sees, feel what she feels. Anger, confusion, resolve.
Ah! You've got the same thing I do. In your head. I felt it.
You've no fear of one of Lolth's chosen. Curious.
Well, I'm not most. I respect Drow. I've no quarrel with you unless you make one. Anyway.
This interaction with Shadowheart is more than just an Easter egg about how she grew up with Drow leadership and several Drow in her religious family. I'm probably going to butcher some of these names, bear with me, but Veyron, who is the Drow patron of shadow magic. He's the son of Aroshin, aka Lolth before she fell from grace, and Corleon, who is the god of all elves. At first, male Drow would pray to him in hopes of escaping the slavery and tyranny of the Lolth-sworn women. However, Veyron used his shadow magic to work with Shar, who he discovered was the owner of the Shadow Weave. They created the School of the Shadow Weave together and formed a short-lived, compared to other religions in D&D, a very short-lived religion that was based on equality among Drow. When Veyron died, most of his followers were converted to Shar. So Larian has so many Drow in Shadowheart's cloister, and then them mentioning she's not biased towards Drow is not just a reference to how she grew up, but a reference to the history of Sharans and how there genuinely are a huge swath of Drow who worship her.
Well, I'm not most. I respect Drow. I've no quarrel with you unless you make one. Anyway, we've both got more pressing concerns, like these tadpoles in each of our heads. These things are going to consume us from the inside and turn us into mind flayers.
You know about mind flayers. Tell me everything.
I don't know much, but enough to be afraid. This is how they breed. We host their spawn, and once they're ready, they'll tear right through us. I'm not sure how much time we have left, but I'm not going to wait to find out. You and I need a healer. Finding one won't be easy in this wilderness. We'll need supplies. I'm hoping something of use might be behind this door, but I've barely made a dent in it so far.
Looks like you need a hand.
Be my guest, but that door's too strong. Maybe there's another way, up the cliff. Hopefully there's no more of these things.
Drow are incredibly prone to violence, so Shadowheart's ability to fight off all of these intellect devourers would be very enticing. If this was a purely sapphic Drow, I would romance her, and I'm saying that as someone who doesn't like her that much. But we're going to touch on why I'm picking who I'm picking when we get there, because it's so much juicier than you think. Quite some carnage at your feet. You have a admirable talent for violence.
Well, these things have been giving me plenty of practice, but I'd rather get out of here than push my luck.
Alliances have been made on less.
Or just company for our final moments. But you're right. Whatever lies ahead will be a little less daunting with support. You can call me Shadowheart.
I've never met an elf, half or otherwise, with such a enticing name.
I've never met a drow with a sense of humor. Perhaps we'll get along.
I'm Vyper. Let's make haste.
Lead the way.
Hurry! I've got one of those brain things cornered. There, in the grass. You can kill it, can't you? Like you killed the others?
Kill it yourself. You look capable enough.
Was hoping for a kind soul. Well, not to worry.
You need a moment to think. Do nothing.
Shh. Not a word. let's try to keep that lovely neck of yours in one piece. Hmm? And you, keep your distance. No need for this to get messy.
I need her alive.
Stow that blade, or I'll show you just how messy things can get.
Promises, promises. But I have other business, I'm afraid. Now, I saw you on the ship, didn't I? Nod?
Fuck your face.
You wretched little...
Your mind twists. You're looking out of unfamiliar eyes, prowling dark, busy streets. You try to hold the memory, but it fades to the worm. The light, the fear.
What was that? What's going on?
It's the Mind Flayer's worm. It connected us.
The worm? Of course. That explains things somewhat. And to think, I was ready to decorate the ground with your innards. Apologies.
Apology accepted. I might have done the same thing if the roles were reversed.
A kindred spirit.
You have no idea, love.
My name's Astarion. I was in Baldur's Gate when those beasts snatched me.
I'm Vyper, a Cleric of Lolth.
My, you've been busy. So, did you learn anything about these worms while wandering the ship?
He'll turn us into Mind Flayers.
Turn us into... Of course it'll turn me into a monster. What else did I expect? Although, it hasn't happened yet. If we can find an expert, someone that can control these things, there might still be time.
Travel with me. Our odds are better together.
You know, I was ready to go this alone, but maybe sticking with the herd isn't such a bad idea. And anyone that can crash a Mind Flayer ship and walk away seems like a good person to know. All right. I accept. Lead on.
So aside from the commentary earlier on how male Drow have trained female Drow to expect manipulation as a form of romance to gain protection, there's another much more important reason as to why I'm going to be romancing Astarion. Because he's a vampire. Now, contrary to what you might be thinking, given that my nickname is Astarion's girlfriend and I have a vampire don't smite me, YouTube. Vampire thing. That isn't it. There in the Underdark is a race known as the Vampire Drow. They are the cruelest, most powerful, and most ruthless version of the Drow. But they are also considered to have been granted the highest honor, the Kiss of Lolth, which to Lolthites means vampirism. As Lolth is a woman-dominated culture, it's no wonder that the vast majority of vampires are female. However, on a rare occasion that a male is gifted the Kiss of Lolth, it allows him to ascend in society, but not in the way you might think. They would be one of the few men who have honor or power in any sense of the form. Unlike normal elven vampires, like Cazador, Drow vampires can take the form of giant spiders. Instead of a normal mist, they become a poisonous mist. I note this because if Vyper were to become a vampire, in D&D she would have totally different abilities than the ones you get if you become Astarion's ascended spawn. Many tombs in the Underdark, where the vampire Drow live, also serve as temples to Lolth. And outside of killing members of rival houses, vampire Drow really only speak to priestesses and clerics of Lolth. This is where their power dynamic comes into play. As well, the majority of, I'm going to say romances instead of the word that will get me smitten, the majority of romances that can blossom into the creation of a new Drow spawn are going to be between clergy and the vampires. So lore-wise, Vyper is not only going to be inclined to follow the every direction of Astarion, but she'd also be willing to risk the taboo of expressing love and the hopes that through him she could receive the Kiss of Lolth herself and ascend to an even higher position in her faith, a position that even nobility dream of. Vampire Drow are far from common. The last major update to them was in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, the complete monstrous compendium, but that makes them no less important to Drow history. As a Drow who lives in a lower class house, who would have built very little power from being a cleric, I probably wouldn't have left the Underdark before.
But not comforting. It is a struggle to sink into your trance, weaving together memory, ambition, and purpose. The vision in your mind is simple. A stone altar to Lolth, the knife upon it bloody with sacrifice. Fire spills across your thoughts. Dragon's breath. The tadpole slithers, twisting deeper into your skull. Your head is about to burst. The memory consumes your mind, corrupting the trance.
Drow are known to embrace pain. Often they're tormented both emotionally and physically as public humiliation by their mothers from infancy. Clerics and those of the faith are the closest to Lolth. They're actually known to give the worst punishments whispered to them by Lolth herself. Typically, this punishment is to become a Drider. But we'll touch on that more when we meet Karnas, because, guys, it's interesting.
The tadpole slithers, twisting deeper into your skull. Your head is about to burst. The memory consumes your mind, corrupting the trance.
Let the pain claim you.
Hell surrounds you, flames licking at your body. The tadpole in your head convulses. Agony bursts behind your eyes, and the whole world goes dark.
It's just that I happen to be what's the best way to put this? A vampire. And now you're all mine. And I'm all yours. Until morning, at least.